Hey, everybody, welcome to Black Lotus Live, where we talk about all things strange and unusual. And tonight we are going to be talking with Victoria Mundae about hollow Earth, the possibility that the Earth may be hollow. But before we get into that, we have a special announcement. Sadly enough, I don't know if you know this or not, but Victoria's YouTube channel with Mike Ricksecker called Edge of the Rabbit Hole will be stopping at the end of March. And it's very unfortunate. I have a link to the channel in the chat in the description. So if you haven't seen it, you really should. It's really a good show. They always have very interesting guests on. But the good news is that Victoria will be joining us as a regular panelist here at Black Lotus.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I was wondering what I was going to do.
We'll keep you busy.
Okay. No, I'm happy. Thank you for inviting me to join.
I'm sure. I'm glad you can do it. You know, no pennies involved, but not yet.
No.
But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about Hollow Earth and the possibility and a probability that it's at least somewhat hollow.
I think it's a very good probability.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the Earth is completely hollow like some people do. You know, where they say that there's an inner sun and all that. You know, I believe the Earth is what the Earth is, but I think that there are just vast spaces
Yes.
in the Earth. I mean, in cave systems, and that we just don't know about. You know, and I think that that would likely be the explanation for a lot of these underground alien bases that we talk about. So
I kind of picture almost like a Swiss cheese, like caves, or
Yeah.
tunnels and things like that.
I think that's very accurate as far as what we do know. I do like the term, Hollow Earth. It sounds real catchy and it's really fast to say, but I think it may turn some people off. I think what we're saying, just to rephrase what you said, Damien, we're really talking about undiscovered and unexplored subterranean cave systems and structures like cave systems. I think we could all agree on that terminology. And there are all kinds of things underneath. There are rivers, reservoirs, animals that do live underneath the ground. And the truth is, humans do not like living anywhere except the top of the crust of the planet. So that leaves these areas with a high probability of new discoveries as far as life forms is concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
Years and years ago, I went to Arkansas, and I went. You know, we were in the kind of in the boonies, and I went into this huge cave. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of the cave, but we had to take an elevator down to get into it. I mean, and that elevator ride took almost 5 minutes. I mean,
It reminds me of Howe's
this thing
Cavern
was huge.
in New York, right? Where were you exactly?
By White Buffalo. I don't know if you know where that is.
Is that out by New York?
No.
No, okay.
It's Arkansas.
Different system.
Yeah.
All right, never
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Is it Mammoth Cave?
No, it wasn't Mammoth. I just can't remember. But when I went into this cave, I thought there's got to be tons of caves like this throughout the world, and possibly a lot of them people don't know about. But yeah, this thing was huge. But
Well, let's start from some of the earliest accounts, at least in way of our modern age, and kind of ruminate over some of that. I mean, of course, we have even spoken a little bit about Admiral Byrd and his harrowing story. There are others that reflect this sort of trek into the northern regions or southern regions of our planet, only to find that there was some sort of entrance into a different body. Now, in respect to the recounts on those stories, keep in mind that whatever this hole or whatever they went into, maybe it's other dimensional. I mean, I really don't know. But it happened gradually. Even I think Bird's account was, he's looking down, he sees the ice, and all of a sudden he starts seeing lush vegetation. He notices that the air is getting warmer, and yet at the same time he's observing these atmospheric or environmental differences, but does not realize the bending of the Earth in the way that you might think of going into a hole or something like that. So what these people have described, if it's to be taken in a very literal sense, which I think many people would like to, we kind of have to look at the perception at the time and perhaps how large something like this would have to be to, A, go through it, number one, and B, cover it up, as it's been said, has been done by many different countries, not just the United States. I mean, there was some sort of conflict up on one of these poles some time ago wherein it was, reportedly covered over, and prior to this there was some sort of interdimensional wall that was there that didn't allow for certain things to pass through. I mean, what are your thoughts on this in specific, in way of the source? Sorry, I started tripping on my words there, but the origin of where this came from as a hollow Earth that we know, not necessarily just a cavernous Earth.
Yeah, I have to agree that I think there's a difference between a cavernous Earth and the hollow Earth we supposedly hear of, where there's an actual another sun inside and a whole other atmosphere. I could see it being caves. I don't know about the whole thing with another sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's been a misconception. People call it the hollow Earth, but I've always called it the hollowed Earth. And if you think about lava tubes, the cave systems, like you were saying, there's subterranean cities that are actually beneath the surface. Well, that's what a subterranean city is. But why not live down there if there was something cataclysmic that was going to happen to the Earth? Like, one of the things I've theorized is that it's gone through on its normal trajectory, it went through some sort of anomaly, like a solar flare or something, or some sort of gas or something that was toxic or radioactive that was leaked from the sun or another sun, or some sort of cosmic event. And they had to go underground and live. That would explain so much. Plus the great, the flood, you can actually, up in the mountains, go in the underground in the mountains and survive a flood. So it's totally possible, I do believe.
Mount Shasta, Agartha, what happened to the Lemurians, the whole story with the Atlanteans going up in a large vessel and then retreating into the earth and staying there for, odd numbers of years and coming out only seldomly. It kind of begs the question, do we really need the sun the way that we think we'd need it if it's possible to live in some sort of subterranean state?
Right. Well, it's very possible. I mean,
you hit on just exactly what I was going to say.
I was going to comment that it's very possible to make conditions underneath the ground that are similar to what we experience above the ground. Just a simple example, it's not rocket science, but we do have grow lights, fluorescent bulbs or high pressure sodium bulbs that mimic the sun, and we can use them to grow plants. So if we had energy from heat or from the core of the planet, we could power these lights, and these lights would mimic sunlight. So we could grow food, which would produce oxygen if we grew plants. So the artificial sun thing, I mean, the technology is there. It's very simple. You can make an artificial sun in your closet if you want to illegally grow marijuana. So,
right.
What do you guys think about the Admiral Byrd story?
It's interesting. What if it was put out there as disinformation? Because people are now looking for his point of view, his trek, his journey, and you're looking over here, but it's really over here.
Okay.
Well, we're coming into this with something. Go ahead, Kim.
No, I was just going to say, but when he came back from his trip, he was told not to talk about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's true. And Victoria, you do bring up a good point. This is very possibly misinformation or disinformation to some degree. The fact that we have other stories and other experiences that sort of parallel and mirror what this person reported and then, of course, was asked to be hushed about it, just makes it all that more intriguing. at the end of the day, when you look at a story as fantastic as Admiral Byrd's, of course, you study the individual to the very nth degree. We are now seeing with a very popular experiment, an alternate version, and there's a lot of logic that I'm finding during my research to back up why what we understand as the Philadelphia experiment was the pre-contrived story, if you will, that was fed to the public in one way or another, if you want to look at it that way, considering it was such a secretive program. I have somebody on the sidelines who really can contest this and say this is why they did it this way. It blew my mind, because in my head, no, I didn't subscribe and swallow hook, line, and sinker to that particular experiment, but I thought it was really intriguing, some of the concepts, and yet at the same time I think the concepts or the notions that were implemented within that experiment are probably what's really the beads of truth within that story. So to go back to Admiral Byrd, maybe it's something similar where there are certain things there, and if you pull out these different angles and elements, you may be able to piece together something. Because remember, even back then, certain people within these organizations, such as the Illuminati and the secret projects and so forth, they had certain ways of keeping information secret and yet still allowing some of this to trickle out. And there were people behind these particular experiments too. We often remove ourselves from them and say, there was something else at bay, and they've got all the knowledge and they can keep it locked up forever. We could never get access to the key. But at the same time, there were people who were fallible and had motions behind what they were doing, and sometimes they would push this out to the public. So Admiral Byrd's story is really interesting, and yet at the same time, there's not a shred of physical evidence to corroborate what he said at that time or moving forward afterwards. So the anecdotal is powerful, but to anchor it into the physical and way of a consensus, that's where we struggle.
Right, exactly. Real quick, I want to give some shout outs to some people that are here. Let's see, let me scroll back.
Mr. Crowley, hello.
Mr. Crowley.
Yeah, Mr. Crowley's here.
Vincent, hi.
First of all, Coraline, how you doing?
Hey, Corey. Super.
And we got Anthony from Unidentified S4.
Oh,
yes,
yes.
glad you made it.
Thanks for making it.
Great channel as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I can pronounce his name.
Diecast Monsieur.
Oh, let me pronounce it correctly. It's Zach Diecast, and then the last part I don't know actually, Monsieur. It's Zach Diecast Monsieur, but Diecast.
Monsieur. It's French, isn't it?
Can you say this whole thing correctly?
Zach Diecast Monsieur.
There you go.
Say it 5
We
times.
got Glow Green. The hills have eyes.
Oh,
Most
Glow
definitely, the eyes have you. Let's see. Elna the Fam.
Oh, wow.
She's our chat moderator from Edge of the Rabbit Hole.
Oh, wow.
Is she? Oh,
So-
hi.
Oh, hi.
Alina's awesome. She's a wonderful
Hi to
person.
all of you.
Frapsap. Hello, Frapsap.
It's been a while. Thank you for being here.
Joe Chandler's here.
Oh, Joey Joe.
She's a rabbit holer. Well, that didn't
Oh.
sound. She's from one of our mad chatters. Yeah.
You're mad chatters. I like that.
Mad chatter.
And we have Fred in Alaska here. Fred was on our show
Hey, Fred.
last Thursday, and I think he's going to be on the show this Thursday, and we're going to be talking about a legend in Alaska about little people, and it's like an indigenous legend. So I'm very interested to talk about that because Alaska is not the only place that has it. So let's see who else is rolling in here. I think I got. Oh, Mr. Crowley.
Yep.
Mr. Crowley is
Mr.
here.
Crowley.
Hey, Mr. Crowley.
All right. Okay. Sorry if I missed you, but we got to go on. So I also
everybody.
see that.
Yes.
I also see the DarkHour Paranormal's here.
Ah.
Well,
I know it's a seldom opportunity these days, but you know what? When I can be here, I'll be here, my friend. I do appreciate it.
Glad you made it.
And we
Always
miss
happy to have
you when
you.
you're not.
Yeah.
Cheers, I appreciate it.
Miss you when you're not here, buddy.
You had mentioned Mount Shasta, and But what about the I think it's the Hopi that said that, they described ant people, and these ant people took them underground, and they survived the ice age because of that, and they were down there for many, many years.
They the Hopi actually took him down 2 times. The first world was destroyed by fire, and the second world was destroyed by ice. So the fire would also correlate with what I figured out in my past life regressions, because like the corona events from the sun or something like that, taking them underground would actually help save them.
Awesome.
Back in 1976, 77, if I'm not mistaken, on one of those dates, we were actually in the trajectory of some sort of massive solar flare. Now, most of my knowledge of this comes from Drunvalo Melchizedek and a lot of what he taught in the Ancient Secret to the Flower of Life workshop. But I have found other clairvoyant stories that sort of corroborate this going forward, but if nothing else, this is something to think about. So what I was told was that when this was looked at from the angelic point of view or from the etheric side, there was no doubt that at this point on this day, this thing was going to literally scorch the entire planet, and that would have been it for us. Now, in understanding that we may have done this whole routine from the start of the Big Bang to the very end of whatever that may bring us to. We've done this multiple times. I've heard the number 7. This might be the 8th. With this in mind, we avoided a catastrophic event that had taken us out prior to. Now, my question, just throwing this out there, why would this time period be so significant that angelic intervention would be something that got the green light, whereas, perhaps before we had to go through that decimation and only a handful survived in certain respects, and, we were, repopulating at some point based on what we had left. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts.
Almost sounds like a religious thing. I almost want to say to heal the earth, to rid the earth of sins and bad things. I mean, that comes from my Christianity upbringing. It's what it sounds like, when we're talking about the flood and stuff like that, they were trying to get rid of.
Well, regardless of whether we were trying to atone, the planet in one way or another, if we were to look into the modality that you're presenting, Terry, the fact is that we were spared, at least this way through, wherein, prior to, again, look at some of the states that had sunk, Lemuria, Atlantis, and even what may be there in Egypt and some of these other civilizations around the exact same time period where you see the scorching of the stone and something that looks like had melted from high intense heat. And there are a lot of theories. I mean, Brian Forster talks about this quite a bit, but nonetheless, we were spared. And we had no idea. I mean, I don't think any one of us here, well, I wasn't alive in 76. I had a few years to be born. But, anybody who was awake and alive at that time, I don't think that they were aware. Although, as a byproduct, there was a shift in consciousness wherein we had to then, I don't know how I would say this, we're on a straight course with a certain vibration. This particular event gets truncated, and in that, we had to make an agreement that we would shift into a higher vibration much more aggressively rather than that gradual, slow evolution that perhaps most species go through in this particular respect. And perhaps this is one of the reasons that was a catalyst for where we are today.
Good theory.
Interesting. So let me clarify.
It's good to talk about. It's always good to talk about.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts. Let me clarify to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly before I give my thoughts. So you're saying that there was a event that was very catastrophic. It would have potentially hurt humanity, and so something from underground took it to intervene and save us from that happening.
Yes and no. I mean, maybe I'm not being clear, and I do apologize for that. Long story short, to summarize, in the 70s, there was one of these cataclysmic events based on a solar flare that would have wiped us out, as things have happened like this in the past. So yes, there may have been, people coming underground and so forth. Yeah, so did that answer your question? Because this help apparently came from the angelic realm. Whether it was ever part physical is possible, but I just don't know the answer.
Okay, so you're saying that this thing from space, like perhaps a solar flare, that was going to hurt us, but something angelic stopped it from occurring, so it didn't even occur, so it didn't hurt us?
That's correct. Well, it did occur, but not on, well, for the sake of conversation, let's say our timeline.
Okay, so they diverted the catastrophe.
There was a
basically.
diversion, correct.
Okay, well, okay, so yeah, let me. Extinction is a very funny thing. Okay.
Yeah, sure, you could say that.
There have been. It's because it's very common. There have been several mass extinctions on this planet, and I think we're going to have one eventually. It's part of the system. It's built into the system. So I think it's been at least 5 times where almost all life on Earth has completely vanished. And so, why would these things stop it from happening if it's already happened before? Was your question. So, if something had the potential to intervene, I think it's because they have to have a strong connection with us somehow. It could be emotional, like they care about us, or it could be they made us, or it could be they're using us and they don't want to lose us, we're their property. The thing is, I think it's because there's a connection between us and these things. I don't know what that connection is.
All the above, maybe.
Perhaps, yes.
Setting the angelic thing aside, don't you think this is just a natural occurrence? I mean, I wonder if the vast cave systems are on Mars as well.
Mm-hmm.
They are. I think Robert Bigelow is actually developing technology for inflatable habitats. And these inflatable habitats are going to be in the hollow lava tubes of Mars. So people are already planning for humans to
What
live
about
on
the
Mars.
moon?
And I'm not sure if the moon has volcanic activity.
Oh, they're not going to let us know about that. Come on now.
Yeah,
That's way too close to home.
I had to throw it in, babe. I had to throw it in.
Listen, I'd love nothing more than for Richard Hoagland to be put up on a pedestal and somebody shaking his hand saying, listen, this guy was right, man. Those glass tubes are there. I mean, what he's put out in way of research, and, everybody else that's sort of done this, but, obviously he's been a focal point. I'd love to see that. And you know what? Maybe we will. But as I've always said, and you've heard many times before, disclosure will not come from any authority. It'll come from within ourselves. So get to your astral projection, folks. Get to your astral projection, huh?
Always a good idea.
Wild, you mentioned Robert
What about
Bigelow.
the dark side of the moon?
Wild, you mentioned that about Robert Bigelow. And speaking of him, viewers, next Sunday, we are going to have Erica Lukes, none other than the wonderful Erica Lukes, who was the head of the Utah chapter of MUFON for a long time. And she took a special interest in Robert Bigelow and the Skinwalker Ranch. So make sure you join us next Sunday.
I was going to mention something.
Anyway.
I was going to mention something scientific that would, some circumstances that give evidence that perhaps there are a lot of living things on the Earth, inside the Earth, underneath the crust, and that why we haven't interacted with them. Well, just how humans, we are very, very specialized to live on the surface of the planet. We're not specialized to live in the air, underwater, or in a cave system. So that's why we stay here. So whatever lives underneath the Earth, I'm pretty sure they're super specialized to live only under the Earth. So I'm saying there would never be cross-pollination. It wouldn't be that common. It's very uncommon. So if throughout history these two biomes were separated, it makes sense why we still haven't discovered it, because there's really no crossover that happens frequently.
Yeah, Wild, maybe we're the anomaly.
Yeah.
It could be. It's all a matter of perspective.
If these beings did create us, okay, and their species have the capacity to exist underground, and perhaps that's where they live naturally, as we've heard. Again, maybe we're the anomaly, and they did this on purpose. Give them these certain limitations and restrictions. They'll never follow us down there. They won't be able to get there. I'm just thinking here.
No. You're very right. No, you're very right.
Don't you think that we could adapt to living underground?
It would take years, right? It would take years and years and years.
And the other thing is, we could do it quickly with technology, but I think that the thing that's preventing us from doing that is the desire to do it. There's, everything's moderately okay. If you look at a macro scale, a large scale, we're doing okay on the surface of the planet. So there's no strong motivation to go underneath and adapt and stuff like that. If there was a catastrophe on the surface of the Earth and it was uninhabitable, then that would speed up that process, where we would want to go underneath the crust.
What about the mental condition?
Mole people.
Yeah.
Well, you forget the moon is hollow, remember? The moon is hollow, so we could live inside.
Yeah,
The
you
moon is
start like a
hollow?
big slide.
Yeah.
You slide back and
Yeah.
forth from one end to the other.
It rang like a bell, remember?
Yes, if it's an artificial satellite, they did a damn good job disguising that thing. It looks like the moon to me. You know?
Well, I mean, it's perfect when you have a solar eclipse. It fits in perfectly when you have a lunar eclipse. There, I mean, they're no other
Oh, yeah.
moon is that good. We have the
That-
best moon. Yeah.
That,
Yeah, you're right.
Speaking of eclipses and the phases of the moon, that's the thing that bothers me most about this topic, is because I think it's very feasible that the Earth could be somewhat hollow. But when you tell people that, they immediately equate you with a flat earther. And flat earthers get on my last nerve. They really do, because it's just not
Here's a
feasible.
mine too.
Yeah. But, it's just not feasible.
When you want to bring a theory like this, pseudoscience, to the table, I mean, most people at least have some sort of mathematic behind them or some logical reasoning that they believe what they believe. I have to say, I sit in the same seat with you, Damien, that, flat earthers just don't have a leg to stand on. And if they did, they would be standing on a round globe. But either way, well, for all intents and purposes,
Right?
there's just no science
Ghost-
behind it, guys.
blah, 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 blah. Exis Ghost Investigator wants to know what our opinion is on another world being inside the Hollow Earth.
Sure, all kinds of
Well,
ecosystems.
Well, I think what he's referring to is possibly another civilization that's living under there. Yeah, because
Well,
I've heard of
possible.
that theory.
It's possible on several different ways.
I mean, some people have even said that Hitler didn't die, and he and the Nazis fled to Antarctica, and are even today living underground. I don't buy that theory, but it's a theory that's out there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's where all the reverse technology came from, was when the aliens and Hitler were, hiding in the hollow earth. That's when all the reverse technology came along, and Roswell and all that kind of stuff. So I do think the media has done a huge disservice to any real scientific progress through, pop culture and movies and stuff. Because now when you say something like, yeah, I believe in a hollowed earth, people will laugh at you and they'll joke at you. So why hide the science?
If you look at maps of tunnel systems throughout the United States and the world, it's like a spider web. Everything connects.
Right.
So how could it? How is the possibility not there?
Right,
Yeah,
and I think that's what Michael was saying when he said, when you come to the table with this, you've got to have scientific evidence,
Right.
And that is, of course, scientific evidence,
Yeah, there's a tunnel system that exists between Göbekli, I never can pronounce it right, Göbekli Tepe and
Göbekli
Scotland.
Tepe.
Yeah, okay.
You got
I'm
it.
from Texas. I have an accent.
It wasn't bad.
But there's a tunnel system that exists all that way up to Scotland. I think it's Scotland.
All the continents connect. Even there's
yeah.
underwater tunnel systems as well.
Right, and that's what Michael was talking about earlier about the
Right.
tunnel system that starts under Mount Shasta, and ends up in possibly Lemuria.
I have a question for the group.
Tell us.
Anybody could answer. The question is, why does it matter if there is, a hollow Earth or a hollowed Earth? In other words, how does it affect us? How does it affect humanity? What is the implication if there is that?
Well,
I
first
don't
of
think
all,
it affects us really.
think about
It
what
is
we're
what it
doing
is.
underground. In a military sense, deep underground
sure,
military
yeah.
bases. You have the subterranean that's purportedly out there to exist, using nuclear technology to basically melt through rock. So, I mean, if this is the case, and there are these certain cavernous areas that certain civilizations are living in, let me refer back to Phil Schneider's story, wherein he was there excavating on a routine military installment, broke through a wall, and all of a sudden he happened to find a different life form, and there was a battle. I mean, it's it does affect us, especially if we want to start looking at going underground. I mean, the fact that we're doing what we're doing to our atmosphere now, I don't know exactly where we'll be in 100 years, but if it's as degrading as we are told, there's a good possibility that we may have to, at some point, a good part of the population, I should say, would seek refuge underground at one time. So maybe not right now, Damien. We need to look at that in such an overall fashion, saying, how is this affecting our everyday life? But we have to keep in mind there are people who are doing within their own organization certain drilling and digging, whether it be for fossil fuels, whether it be for bases, or even transport systems like Elon Musk, or some of these other entrepreneurs that have these very big ideas and the money to invest in them, and we see them building these things underground. Not to mention all the ancient ones that are already there. I think we need to know as much as we can about the mass of our Earth in way of the volume, and whether or not we really have connecting tunnels that we can utilize. I mean, shit, if we could put a rail system from Paris all the way to Las Vegas, you could get there in 10 minutes. Hey, as long as it was sound and didn't hurt the Earth the way that I think it would, I'd be all for it.
Well, that's a
What
great
would
answer.
What would happen to humanity if they found out one day everything they believed in was wrong? I mean, how would that affect,
Right.
The cultures?
Yeah, I think
It depends on what you mean
We
by
have that
everything.
now.
Yeah.
Well, if you think, woohoo, humans, we're number one, we're on top of the earth, but
right.
you suddenly find out there's a whole slew of people living beneath
Right.
the earth. And
Right. And the same
How would that-
question has been posed about disclosure about aliens. If suddenly
Right.
humanity knew for a fact that aliens existed, how would that affect us? And a lot of people think that we would lose our ever-loving minds. I don't think we would. Not now. Maybe at one time.
No, because so many of us already know, and the rest of them, they refuse to believe anything. So they're not going to believe anything more than that as it is.
Right. And I recently saw a poll that stated that somewhat over 50% of people in America anyway believe in aliens and UFOs. And so I don't think we would lose our minds. I mean, gone are the days of
No.
War of the Worlds where people supposedly flipped out because of an alien invasion.
Right.
I think
Which actually didn't happen.
which actually didn't happen. I don't know if you guys know about that or not, but yeah. I
Well,
just don't think that we would lose our minds. Now, when you say everything, if people suddenly found out that aliens exist, ghosts are real, Bigfoot is real, yeah, they might lose it a little bit. But as far as like aliens and possibly aliens living inside of our Earth or their Earth, whatever it is,
right.
I don't think people would lose their minds at all.
Well, let me ask you this question. If everything was to come out the way that we're talking, and the awareness was there, the information was there for those who wanted to accept it, does it really matter? Is it necessary for every single last one of us to believe?
No, I don't think
Probably
so.
not.
No.
Yeah, I think it'd be good if a majority finds out about it, but there will always be people that don't accept, and they stay stuck in their ways, and that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think that's
Look at
natural.
how many people still believe in flat Earth versus
Right.
round Earth.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to ever convince everybody of anything, I don't think.
I think the one thing that might change is all of our, I was talking about religions earlier. All the religions might have to think twice about what their religion really means,
Well, I'll tell you,
what their belief system
the
is.
Pope came out and accepted aliens a while back and said something along the lines of, we're all God's children,
Mhm.
no matter where we're from.
Yes, but what if
Well,
they find
in
out
the
that
Bible-
the aliens is the God and not the God that they think is God? If you follow my questioning.
There's
There
spoke
are
over
many
100
people who have
times
already
in the
found that out.
Bible.
So you would have more of a personal crisis going on then.
Yeah.
Kimberly, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Like I said, it spoke of different beings on different planets over 100 times in the Bible.
Really? I don't recall that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've already did the research on that. I did that about 3 years ago.
Didn't the
Oh, I'd like to
Nephilim
hear
come
about
from?
Different beings of different planets. Yeah.
Yeah, the Nephilim were from another planet, I think, right?
Yes.
Or originally they came down. They got jiggity with Earth humans, and you know.
That's
Something
just
along those lines. Something
That is
along
what
those lines. Huh?
that is the good word as it is printed. Yes.
Okay. With the get jiggity part, or
Yes, exactly. It was a sloppy translation, but that is what it says. So,
That was a lot of wine back
More
in
like
those days. I
shebang.
mean, even Jesus was drinking.
They
Now,
drove him to
this-
drink.
Mr. Crowley pointed out that the Catholic Church is already putting in fail safes. They're already beginning to take moves to prepare their Catholic flock,
Oh, geez.
with the idea that aliens are real, which I think is smart. That's a very smart way to handle it preemptively before it becomes an issue. They're
Well, they do
basically
have
seeing.
They do have a telescope, you know,
They do.
and
That's what I
you
was
got to
gonna say.
wonder
Are they
why
seeing
they have
something?
that.
I think they're reading religious texts as well, and they're piecing out the truth from all these religious texts, and they're putting a picture together that means that humans are not the only intelligent life.
I think they have enough in their warehouse to actually figure that out below.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And then-
yeah.
And if I could answer the question about what, Victoria, you said like what would happen if I'll phrase the question away so my answer is more specific. So the question is, what would happen if, let's say, the majority of the people on the planet realized that most of the paranormal things we thought were fake are real, and the reason why they realize it is because there's enough strong evidence to support it. So it's kind of unavoidable. What do I think would happen if basically people find out the truth about ghosts, Bigfoot, Hollow Earth? Well, I think it would mirror what happened to me personally, and perhaps what happened to other people. Is that there's stages people go through. You could get stuck on some, but I believe the early stages of this new information will be anger that you've been lied to. So you're going to feel anger. You're going to feel anxiety and fear of what could potentially happen with these other beings, what they could do to you. And hopefully at the end stages will be acceptance. And at the very end, hopefully it'll be wonder, like you're filled with this wonder and awe about the possibilities. So I think some stages would probably
You
happen.
just want to know more.
Yeah.
You just
hopefully
want to
that's
know
what-
more. You've got more questions that need to be answered.
Yes.
Well, keep in mind that the fundamental error of religion is not to be asking certain questions. So what I could see certainly happening on one outcome, if you will, is that let's say extraterrestrials introduce themselves to us tomorrow. So at that point, it's not that every religion will now bow underneath whatever's coming in way of this extraterrestrial life, even if they do seemingly have magical powers or whatever you want to call it. They're going to find a way to integrate the religion into the advent of this. So, I mean, for example, they may call this the second coming of Christ and then hinge onto the New Age belief that Christ consciousness is not necessarily physically embodied the way that we imagined, and yet is something that we can anchor. So I think a lot of these religions do have the insight into the esoteric world that we're all, grabbing at and seeking with such vigor. And they don't release that because it disempowers the religion, right? Puts the power into the people. Now, if extraterrestrials come down, there's a good chance that this knowledge itself is self-empowering to individuals, right? Because now we know that there's a different path, there's a much wider world than what we were aware of. So I believe religion will try to rise up into that same echelon as where these extraterrestrials sit in way of perception, or at least the way that people are interacting, so that they don't lose the power that they've had for millennia.
Well, what if,
Right.
how people try to save face after the fact? What if, let's just say the religion said, well, we've known about this the whole time. I mean, just look at Ezekiel. We
Right.
told you about that
Right.
years ago.
Right.
It's not
Oh,
my
yeah.
fault if you didn't understand it.
Oh, I'm sorry,
know.
you weren't old enough yet. You weren't old enough. We couldn't tell you.
If I
Yeah.
could piggyback on that, Victoria, I think actually religion mixes very well with real life supernatural phenomena, the UFOs. I think they mix very well in a way that science doesn't mix well. I think science is the one religion. I do think science is a religion. That's the religion that doesn't mix well with the UFOs. But if you look at Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, it's full of supernatural claims. It's all
Oh, yeah.
supernatural stuff. So I feel like it would mix fairly well, actually.
I
What do you
agree,
guys
but I
think
think-
about this? What do you
Well,
guys think about the story that recently came out that NASA is hiring top theologists to talk to them about how news of aliens should be broken?
I think that's exactly what we're talking about. How do you merge what is obvious? With
Well,
what
no,
your
I'm
faith is,
I'm
you know?
asking. Do you think that that's real? That they've actually done that?
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sure. Even if they're
Yeah.
not planning on doing anything, I'm sure they would have to have a plan.
It is real. Yeah, my
Oh,
dad
it's
told me
real.
about it. I looked up articles on it. It has happened. Yeah.
Really?
Well, think about Dr.
But look
Stephen
at all the
Greer
biblical-
addressing. Go ahead, Kim.
Go ahead, babe. No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I know there's a lag there. I'll say very quickly. Look at Dr. Stephen Greer debriefing so many heads of the government on this particular phenomenon specifically for so many years. I mean, he's still doing it. I'll put it that way. I'll say it that way. He's still doing it. So if there's no need for a precursory effort to sort of prepare themselves and maybe the rest of the planet for what comes next, because I don't think everybody in NASA and within that particular tier of the government really knows for sure perhaps what some people above them do, and so maybe some of these folks are still sitting in the same boat as we are, like, hey, let's explore. We don't really know for sure. We've heard things, but we don't know. That's something to consider as well.
The simple pictures of painted UFOs and the beings piloting the crafts in these pictures, are they just totally ignored? Because it's not just one picture. There's a whole slew of
Right.
pictures with baby Jesus, Mother Mary holding the baby and everything. There's pictures of all kinds, and not one picture will you ever find people in fear of looking at these, and they're looking up at it like, yeah, okay. They're not showing fear in it, so it's had to have been something that was seen at all times, or
Or they're
or at
just
least
completely ignoring
routinely.
it.
But I mean, if there was fear of these crafts in the air that these people were painting, then they would have showed fear in faces people looking up at them. I mean, these are biblical pictures, so that's a religious factor as well.
The closest thing I've seen to something like that, where they were actually acknowledging that thing in the sky, was I saw one where this guy was pointing to it up in the sky. But again,
There's
no
several.
fear.
Yeah.
And in most of these, I mean, they just it's like it's just commonplace.
Exactly.
They're used to it.
Well, we have to wonder, too, how many
Right.
of those ships actually landed and made some sort of interaction with people in the ancient days, and if that interaction was something amicable or more belligerent. Certainly, if these vessels are just flying above them and, the farmers down in the medieval days, let's say, are looking up, we don't know what it is, but holy crap, look at that thing. That's crazy, huh, Fred? That's great. Get the corn. I mean, there's not much they're going to do in way of interaction, but they'll record it and are not threatened by it because they have no reason to be threatened by it. Today, we had World of Worlds, and we had a whole slew of different narratives, let's say, coming into the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so forth in way of how we should depict extraterrestrial life. Well, of course, a lot of this was harmless entertainment, but at the same time, it really did program the populace moving forward with the generations on what to look at. I'll give you a quick example. I showed my kids E.T. for the very first time this weekend, and the first thing my son says to me is, he's friendly. So where would he get the notion that it should be anything else? You know what I mean? I thought that was very curious, but I think it's a certain consensus that we all sort of share.
Right. And I, like Victoria was saying earlier about the Hollow Earth, I blame the media entirely for the way we look at stuff like this. And it started, like I said, back in the 50s, with these, it came from outer space and that kind of stuff. I think the best I'm a huge science fiction fan. I think the best science fiction movie that came out during that time period was The Day the Earth Stood Still, because it came with a very positive message that we need to clean our shit up, So, yeah. And unfortunately, there weren't more movies like that, So, yeah, I totally blame the media for that. Independence Day is another good example, where it's the evil aliens coming to get us, And,
Well, I spoke to Richard Doty once, and he actually said the day the war the day the Earth stood still was actually sponsored by the government. Parts of it was, but you have to look back at the media. Disinformation is not just visual media. I mean, media could be anything like books. Like the best way to control a population or populace or a group is through fear. And if you look at the second half of the Bible, there's so much fear in there, that it started way back then, controlling the people through fear. And so that continued on through the aliens and the UFOs and everything, so that they're coming to eat us and rip our heads off and steal our babies. It's just perpetuating fear so they can control the people.
Yeah.
That's through religion and the dogma.
And Christianity isn't the first to do this. I mean,
no.
Even the Epic of Gilgamesh, the goddess tells people, if you don't make things right, if you continue to act immorally, that I will raise the dead from the ground and they will eat the flesh of the living. I think it's the first reference to a zombie I've ever heard of.
Right.
But so it's, I'm of the personal belief that that's what religion was, why religion was created, to control the masses, and it was government sponsored.
Yeah,
So,
and the Bible's the tool.
Yeah, because you want to be good, you want to go to heaven. But hey, by the way, can you give me 10% of everything you have?
right.
Yeah, and by the way, can you mind if I have your approval? That's what I need to feel nurtured, secure, and have that entry into heaven. I mean, back then, some of these leaders were revered as gods. I mean, God, even today, you have some certain leaders that are revered as actual incarnate gods. So, we know today that this was not the case in most circumstances, especially when you look at our ancient history. And yet, we have a parent and child sort of construct here, wherein the populace is the children, the parents are those in charge, and yet obviously the abuse is overwhelming of that particular power. But we again go back to programming and the way that we've always sort of been. Perhaps this is reflective of the way that we would interact with our parents if they were extraterrestrials, where we would have a certain reverence for them. But this has been bastardized and adulterated as human beings have sort of taken up this role, and extraterrestrials sort of backed off little by little, I think maybe to give us the space with our own evolution without their involvement. I mean, I understand that our particular experiment, if you will, is unique because most times the species or whatever populace of a planet has that intuitive guide of spirit for the entire way. Now, I don't know what that dynamic would actually look like in the end because we don't have much to compare it to, but if this is the case, we are a specialized version where we are literally ostracized, cut off from spirit in the most illusory sense, but illusory enough that we're actually tangible with it. There's something very interesting here in the dynamic of our connection to the extraterrestrials and, whether we're going to be eventually one day living within our planet.
It's very interesting. It strikes me like a small revelation strikes me as we're talking about this, is that in a lot of ways, I think almost everything that we consider paranormal, so let's say cryptids like Bigfoot, aliens, Hollow Earth, ghosts, it really, to me, it seems like all of this can be classified in one thing, and it's basically undiscovered forms of life, just different types of life that is around us. I mean, that's all what it is basically. And then, if I read the religious Bible, the Christian Bible says that God gave us the planet, and He gave us all the animals and plants on the planet, on the surface, for us to take. But He didn't say anything about the sky or underneath the earth, because it seems like these are different biomes. The underneath the crust is one biome that's very, very separate from the crust where we live. Underneath the ocean is another biome, and the sky where we see UFOs is a yet another biome. So they're very segmented. And then another biome, I think, is the astral plane, which is potentially where ghosts live. But all of these things, they just represent different forms of life that we have not yet discovered as a whole species.
Well, I think that people, it's like that movie line from A Few Good Men. People can't handle the truth, so you're talking about all these biomes, and if you describe this to the average person who doesn't research this kind of stuff, it would just go totally over their head.
It would.
And people when people react like that, they immediately think you're nuts. That you don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's not real. So yeah. But anyway, I think we're going to get out of here for the night. Victoria, thanks a lot for joining us. Michael, it's great to see you again.
Likewise, my friend.
And it's a shame that you can't be here next Sunday, because I think you'd have a lot of questions for Erica Lukes.
For our next MUFON, you bet I would.
Yep. And by the way, she feels the same way about MUFON that you do.
I imagine that's what most of them. Yes, yeah,
Wow.
they're all in the same boat.
I know I do.
Juicy.
Oh, yeah.
Juicy.
So yeah. But viewers, thanks a lot for watching as always, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and hit the bell and share away. If you have friends that are into these topics that we talk about here, most definitely share it with them. Share it to your socials, to your groups. But anyway, until next time, keep thinking and question everything.